What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Bonsai Jungle. On today's episode, I'm going to be taking you on a tour of the Bonsai Jungle, which of course is this backyard nursery that I have been working on over the past 2 years. But before I do that, let me address the very sad news we got over the past week, which is that Bjorn is moving back to Japan. So when I recorded my last 2 videos, I actually had no idea that he was moving back to Japan. And it was kind of an emotional roller coaster from seeing him at the shows and thinking, wow, this is amazing to have this world famous bonsai artist teaching here in the United States and running what I would consider a crown jewel in the American bonsai nursery scene. And then to hear that he's closing it down and moving back to Japan, very bittersweet news. I'm sure a lot of us are sad that he's no longer going to be with us here in the United States, although I'm sure his new nursery in Kyoto is going to be amazing, and I hope that everybody who wants to visit one day gets an opportunity to do so. So I wish him all the best with his new project, and I wish all of you the best with your trees. But without further ado, let me take you on a tour of the Bonsai Jungle. So here's my bonsai bench. I've painted it since you've last seen it, and I just bought some random wood stain. I mixed them together, and I think the color turned out pretty decent despite that. I did that to save a buck, but my original intention was just to protect the wood, so didn't really care, and like I said, despite that process, I think it turned out pretty decent. Anyways, here we have the top shelf, so of course I got my best stuff, and it's a procumbens juniper I bought the other week, a shimpaku, and of course my best tree, that procumbens from Bill Valvanis, and then we have the white cedar that I also bought the other week at the Chicago Botanic Gardens show, and then this is a Atlantic cedar, Cedrus atlantica glauca is the cultivar name of that one. We have a sago palm just as decoration in the upper right hand corner, and then we have a lodgepole pine I thinned out, and I never uploaded the video and I think I lost the footage, so oh well. And then we have the ginkgo biloba, and one of my favorite projects, this is a Yard-adori Colorado blue spruce. I don't know if I should classify this as a root of a rock or maybe a penjing, since I'm doing more of this mountain landscape. I've got some purple foliage in the bottom there. That is brass buttons cultivar, and now that it's been growing for 2 years, I'm going to have to restyle it as the weather gets colder here. This is a cork bark pine. I wish the trunk was thicker, but don't we all? I think the foliage is getting a little bit out of hand, so I've started, decandling it. Like I made the video a couple weeks ago just to try and keep that growth more compact. And then this is a shimpaku juniper I bought off eBay. Now the story behind this is when it was advertised, of course the photos looked great, but when it was delivered to my house, it looked like very sick. It was declining, very obvious decline in health. All that internal foliage died off, although you can see it is sprouting back along some of that old wood there, and then of course I've got a lot of new vigorous growth coming out of the foliage tips. Basically, what the story is behind this one is that somebody put it on eBay. They were just trying to get their money back when they realized they didn't know how to take care of it, and I kind of bought it in the nick of time where it was declining in health, but it was still salvageable. So like I said, I fertilized it, I repotted it, and I got a lot of new growth coming out of the tips of those needles the past month, so I think it's going to pull through. I'm excited to have that semi-cascade shimpaku juniper. Anyways, that is a Yard-adori Douglas fir. I tied the apex to that stick, but I think I'm going to remove that and just do a full cascade, and I'm going to do it as a root over rock, so that's why I've been growing it in such a tall pot. So look forward to that video coming up soon. I'm probably going to do this as the weather gets colder. We had another cedar, it was a Cedrus labani green prince, and then we have this dwarf Alberta spruce. I can't believe it's been 2 years since I originally styled this twin trunk design, and as you can see, the foliage pads have gotten lost in all the growth, so I'm going to be doing a restyling of that in the coming weeks. And then here we have the eastern white pine. Not really a whole lot of difference since the last time you saw it. This is my Japanese black pine. It's a cork bark pine cultivar, and then one of the major problems with this tree is the inverse taper, but that's kind of to be expected because these are grafted onto regular Japanese black pine rootstock. So once the cork bark starts corking up, you can get a little bit of an inverse taper. And I think that apex, as the sacrifice branch, was chopped a little bit too early, so I've kind of just put it back into a larger container, and I'm going to see if I can grow another sacrificial branch and correct that issue that I mentioned. Anyways, here we have the world famous bonsai jungle. As you can see, there's a lot of weeds growing here. I really need to do a better job keeping up on all these weeds, but stuff like the crabgrass, it just grows so notoriously. Even if you rip it up the next week, it's already resprouting. So I've tried to do my best to stay on top of it this year, but without any kind of landscaping fabric, it's just a constant, endless battle here in the bonsai jungle. And hopefully one day I'm gonna get a grip on it, and hopefully as the weather cools off and it starts slowing its growth, I'll be able to rip it all out and manage it going into the winter time and have less of a problem next year, but we'll see. This is a Pinus resinosa. It's an American red pine. Maybe not the best material, but a lot of the stuff I have back here is just experimental material. It is whatever is available here at the nurseries in northern Illinois that I buy because, I like the dwarf characteristic or the species, or, got it for a good price, and I just planted it in the ground to see what I can do with it. Now, I don't know if people are wondering about this. I don't think I've ever specifically mentioned the purpose of the bonsai jungle and when I'm planting all these trees in the ground, that I'm doing this to thicken the trunk, and it thickens a lot faster in the ground than it would in a container, so we can take some young nursery stock, thicken up that trunk, chop it back, then put it into a plastic training pot for a couple of years, keep refining it with some wiring and styling, and then it kind of speeds up this process of turning seedlings into more refined bonsai trees. It's not ideal because if you do trunk chops, it can leave some ugly scars, but that doesn't mean that we can't start chopping this back while it's still in the ground and at the same time get more vigorous growth, like I said, leading to a quicker development. So, like I said, we'll just see what we can do here. Now, these are some Japanese white pine. The major flaw with this was when I ordered them, I couldn't pick my own plants. It's kind of whoever at the online nursery gets the order, goes out, pulls a random tree, hopefully matches the cultivar that you ordered, throws it in the box and sends it to you. Those are kind of low to the ground. This one kind of has a better trunk on it. For some reason, I get a lot of these random branches dying off on my white pine, and then of course there is the dying needles on the interior, but those are pretty normal. Pines, they don't hold on to their needles forever, so a lot of the interior stuff is falling off now, and then what's left is just the newest growth at the ends of the branches. So I'm going to leave those in the ground a little bit longer. I'm pulling out some tomatoes. I planted these because I inoculated the soil here with vine cap mushrooms. I thought the fungus would help, live in symbiosis with all these plants and break down the fertilizer quicker. And then here, of course, we have a little project that got overgrown with the mint, but it was a Sarracenia purpurea pond that I just threw a plastic liner in a hole in the ground, and I'm growing it as a decoration. It got overgrown by the mint. Once again, I planted it as ground cover to help the fungus, but it's just kind of gotten away from me. I'm going to be ripping all this mint out of the garden this year. Now this, you can see the very interesting foliage, looks like a boxwood. That was actually a cultivar of a yew. And then this is a ginkgo biloba. I think it needs some more fertilizer. This foliage has been kind of yellow. You can see it's kind of filling out more green towards the interior of the leaves, but I kind of just neglected to fertilize it this year. I don't know, the summer just passed by so fast when you work 6 days a week, sometimes 7, that I didn't fertilize this as much as I'd want to. So definitely going into winter time, I'm hitting all this stuff with 2 more rounds of fertilizer, so that'll hopefully green up the foliage a little bit more with a extra blood meal. And then I'm going to be putting on just some standard 10-10-10 organic fertilizer, well balanced, just to help the roots and lignify the branches and all that good stuff as we head into the winter time. Here we have a Japanese black pine planted in the ground, and then we have a mugo pine. It was like a cheap $10 one from Home Depot. It's a multi-trunk. Mugo pines as nursery stock tend to grow like that unless you get a specific cultivar. So I'm going to turn this into a forest planting on a rock, and I'm just waiting for those trunks to grow maybe 3 or 4 times taller before I do any wiring, because there's just not enough secondary branching on any of these to really wire or do much branch selection. There's not any branches there yet, just a single trunk. So like I said, I'm letting that grow much taller before I do any styling on my mugo pine grove. Now these are all trees that were destined for the compost heap. That is actually a true quaking aspen that I bought, and I thought this was a secondary quaking aspen aspen that just coincidentally sprouted up in the peat moss, but it has a lot larger foliage, so who knows. Those are some birch trees that grew as weeds in my Sarracenia collection, so instead of throwing them out, I'm just going to see what I can do as a forest planting. This is what I call the Home Depot Shimpaku. It's not a true Shimpaku, but it is a Chinese juniper, and then this is a ginkgo biloba. This is called the American cultivar of ginkgo biloba, and that's not American like redneck hillbilly American, but Mariken. It's a dwarf cultivar, so I didn't plant it in the ground because it's really slow growing, and it should thicken up just as much over the next 3 years in that large container as it would in the ground. Now here we have kind of a mess. You can see the crabgrass is not been pulled in this area, but it has been pulled in the procumbens row that I planted here. We have about 25 to 30 of these procumbens junipers that I've started to plant in a little bit of a neater row as I expand the bonsai jungle. So moving forward, I'm gonna just reduce my vegetable garden, or maybe just dig up a different section of my yard and do more and more nursery plantings back here in the bonsai jungle. Now these are, I think, Rocky Mountain junipers. I didn't realize what they were when I was buying them at the time. I just bought them for the nice foliage, and they were only $8 a pop, so I really regret not buying more Rocky Mountain juniper when I had the chance, but I guess there's always next year. Now this is another Japanese white pine, and I think this is the best trunk shape I have overall, but that's gonna probably finish it for most of the trees I have in this main section of the bonsai jungle. This, of course, is the mugo pine. I made a video earlier this year about it. I really like the way this turned out. That's like 1 year from nursery stock, and it's looking pretty nice, so I'm probably going to go ahead and repot it and start training it into a bonsai pot. This is a bald cypress, one of my favorites. Its trunk is thickening up pretty decently for it just being planted in some, I don't know, what is that, 20-30 gallon bucket that I bought from Home Depot. Unfortunately, the plastic is thin, so it kind of cracks away, but hopefully it won't take too much longer for the trunk to thicken up. We'll do a trunk chop and see what we can do with a bald cypress. This is another bald cypress. It's called a Shawnee Brave cultivar, and the foliage looks a little bit different when you go up close. I planted this in the ground, so hopefully this is going to be too much of a nightmare to dig up, but I'm just waiting for that trunk to thicken to maybe 3 times the size. I'm going to have one of those big jumbo ones I do the trunk chop on. And then to finish this off, I've got a ginkgo. It's kind of changing for the fall colors, and this one is a full moon maple that has unfortunately a fungal disease on it. I bought a coral bark maple with this fungal disease. It spread to the full moon, so unfortunately I've been spraying it with a fungicide, but it doesn't seem to be working too much, so we're going to see what I can do. I've just been applying the Scott's Disease EX and spraying the leaves with mancozeb, so we'll see if I can cure it in this fall season going into the next spring and summer. But that's going to be it for the bonsai jungle today. Well, as always, good luck with your plants, and I'll see you in the next one.